Welcome back to BLOCKTV. It's time now for Chain Breakers, our chance to speak with those individuals who are using blockchain as a means to disrupt established markets. Rarely have we had a company come to speak with us that more fits that description. Rune Wallet's stated mission is to build the consumer products and enterprise infrastructure for a new financial system based on cryptographic proofs instead of trust. And I speak now with Michał Pospieszalski, president of Rune Wallet. Michał, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. All right, so to kick things off and help explain to our audience here, tell us a little bit about Rune Wallet, what it is you guys do, and how you're aiming to disrupt the industry.
So fundamentally, in the history of crypto, right, or in the history of fintech, the second that transactions end up on a server, the server has sort of full control, right? So the way a server gets hacked is somebody takes over the full control, and then they abscond with funds and do whatever, right? So we're completely changing that paradigm by having a server that's based entirely on cryptographic proofs. So what that server does is it can't abscond with the funds. So just imagine, I'm imagining our audience is pretty technical, but imagine that the server no longer has the ability to control what the fund, to do anything with the balances, for example, right? Two users have to agree. So that's the central premise. And once you do that, there's a bunch of other things we add on. Like we have identity functionality that works across all the blockchains, all 1,500 of them, that works very similar to PayPal today. And you can KYC AML with it. And we store funds in a multi-sig pool of servers that always acts in the user's interest. So for the first time in the history of fintech, the fintech can provide services without having to trust itself, really, because it's trusting the technology instead.
All right, so I understand you've got some sort of diagrammatic explanations that can help to break down some of the more specific elements of what you guys are doing. Could we perhaps take a look at some of those to see how the system works in action?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me share my screen real quick here, and we will get into that. 1 second. All right, so let me just scroll over to the Rune system. So let me present some basic use cases. If you're a bank, for example, so any traditional fintech, our customers are, and we have paying customers, we have customers in due diligence with us. I wouldn't say it's a super fast adoption because the technology is so new, but we're actually a crypto company with clients, which is great. And what we do is, if you're a fintech and you want to, for example, custody cryptocurrency with our server, which for right now in this picture is just abstracted as a single box. It's actually many boxes, but for now let's just call it a single box. With our server, you can custody cryptocurrency, right? So your user can have a Bitcoin account at Bank of America, for example, right? And the second, that is the off-chain side of it, which is also based entirely on cryptographic proofs, just like blockchain itself. The advantage of having that currency off-chain is that the server system processes it instantaneously. So off-chain, two users can pay each other instantaneously. They can pay for services instantaneously. So for example, they could pay for gas with the service and it would happen instantaneously. We do all this without mining. There is no mining. We have a different algorithm based on receipts that proves out the balances, and there's no mining required. So our system processes transactions just as fast as a regular fintech server, right? Like an Oracle server, for example, or any. So what we make is we make the server, which is this notary. And the reason we call it a notary is because it can't alter the balances. And then we make a software wallet and a hardware wallet that we white label and we insert into customer apps. So we have one social media client right now that is deploying the server and is also deploying the wallet, and we're labeling the wallet as their wallet. So it's going to be, I can't tell you who they are, but their wallet is going to be branded by them, but it's actually going to have our functionality on the inside. And so all these social media users will be able to pay each other with whatever cryptocurrency they desire instantaneously. And then we also are developing a chip that powers all this stuff. So from a wallet perspective, our wallet is like a regular on-chain wallet, plus it features all the off-chain stuff, right? So that's an example of one use case. Another use case, if you're a fintech, you can operate what's called a token issuer wallet, which is like your version. It's our wallet that an issuer would operate, or a business. And that business can, for instance, print digital currencies, right? Or equivalents of fiat. So they can print, for example, a Bank of America dollar. And that Bank of America dollar can live in the off-chain system and be processed instantaneously. It can also move to the blockchain. In fact, it can move across chains, because you could start and print the token on, say, Bitcoin Cash, but then the user wants to move it to Ethereum. They can do that. So that is the basic overview.
One thing I'd like to ask, Michał, and if we can get your face back there on screen so we can take a good look at you. But
hold on a second.
No problem.
I want to share this slide soon too, but I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, we'll get back to that, but let's...
all right, cool.
But I want to ask as well, so obviously I assume this will be, given you're working with sort of sensitive information and a number of different fintechs with different purposes, that you'd be establishing permissioned blockchains. Is that correct?
Well, we're not establishing a blockchain at all. There is no blockchain. So just like Bitcoin was the first, big blockchain, there were other crypto projects before in crypto finance. There was, there was e-gold, for example. There was various attempts. But Bitcoin was the one that broke through and everybody started using because of its unique security model, right? And what it's based on is just a chain of public keys that are tied to private keys that an individual user holds, and then you can get your funds because you can unlock the funds that are essentially encoded to your public key, or a derivative of a hash of it. So that's Bitcoin, right? So that's one way to store value securely. Another way to store value securely is to employ different kinds of financial cryptography. So what we do is we have a pool of servers, which we'll talk about in a second, but for now, let's assume it's one server. And what that server does is it keeps track of everybody's balances via their receipts. So the only thing in our system you need to prove your balance with a particular notary is your last receipt. So there's unique math that's happening there that allows that to happen. So instead of having a ledger that everybody has a copy of, we expect our users to have a copy of their funds. Now, the server can also store a copy of those funds, right? So the only way to sort of delete funds out of the system would be to delete all the known receipts, right? So there'd be no backup at all. But it's really easy for us to back things up. Why is that? Because that receipt stream can be easily backed up to, classically, if it was a mainframe, tape, but in the digital age, it would be on digital storage, right? So we're essentially leveraging, what would be old tech in a very new way, right? So the infrastructure primitives that we use, like servers and backup, are not anything new. But what we're doing with the financial cryptography is extremely new. So all of the financial instruments in our system, because the system supports out of the box, exchange, checks, digital cash, everything is done with cryptography. So for example, the cash actually functions cryptographically like cash. It has value, but it doesn't have an origin. You can't trace it. It's literally like cash, right? It's a digital cryptographic equivalent of what everybody knows as regular cash. So the way our customers implement our system is they call our API on the server, and they, basically use our API instead of what they would traditionally use to implement their functionality, right? And they use a combination of the server plus the issuer wallet and the customer wallet to do all those things.
So one thing I want to ask, though, and I ask this question just because it's a common point of interest among our viewers. There is quite a strong centralization element here in Rune Wallet's servers, correct? I mean, you guys, at the end of the day, while you are using cryptographic proofs, you are still controlling the centralized server through which these elements will be addressed through, correct? Just so I'm understanding it correctly.
Yes and no, because I'm about to reveal to you the many servers that operate this, right?
Please.
So the first question is, let's back up for a second. What's wrong with centralization, right? Like the blockchain revolution was based on the fact that everything should be decentralized. But if you're a fintech company, you want to offer your services and you want to do it quickly and you want to do it in a way where everybody trusts you having custody of their funds. And to do that, you have to have off-chain functionality. So the way that's done today is every exchange has some off-chain system that's usually running just some database that's, for example, doing trading, right? So there is, in fact, already hundreds, if not thousands, of centralized off-chain nodes that you might imagine, like say an exchange throughout the world. They're offering useful services. Why do they exist? They exist because they're offering a service that people want to subscribe to or they want to take part of. So they're going to take their on-chain funds and they're going to move them to this centralized service like Bitfinex, for example, right? It's centralized. And they're going to trade on there. And when they're done, they're going to move the funds off. So what we offer is a way better way of doing that. So would you like to see it?
Please.
Okay, cool. There we go. So here is the Rune pool. So on the previous slide, recall I was talking about this Rune notary, and I said for the sake of argument for right now, call it a single server, right? But actually the way we implement these is can run as a single server. And in that case, it's still state of the art compared to what's being done today because that server can't alter balances. But the server is still holding on-chain funds. So how do we fix that? So we use on-chain multisig, right? And in our multisig scheme, in this case, I have 7 servers here, but in Bitcoin, you can have up to 15. We create a supermajority where to withdraw funds out of the pool, which is all the funds in the pool, so it would be the cumulative funds of all the users across all tokens. And by the way, this doesn't just work with cryptocurrency, it works with anything you can tokenize. So real estate, oil, futures, whatever you want to trade that can be digitized, this system supports. So it's pretty awesome in that way, right? It can even do security token issuance and security token management. So the multisig, what it does is the servers all work together to make sure that unauthorized people aren't taking money out of the pool. To break into the pool, you'd have to break into a supermajority of the servers at the same time. Now here's what's interesting when you said centralization. Because the servers are all operating on cryptographic proofs based on people doing transactions with their private keys off-chain and on-chain, they will always act deterministically, which now means that the pool can be operated by different entities. One server might be Bank of America, another server might be Chase, a third server may be some federal government. In the deployments we're seeing so far, generally, our customers prefer to just operate their own pool because they feel that's good enough, because that fits into the existing model, but it can be federated as I just described. Now, why is this possible all of a sudden? If you could build servers that can't steal, why hasn't anybody done it yet? Why are we the first ones? So the answer to that question is that you have to have an off-chain system based on cryptographic proofs in order to make that possible, because otherwise the servers would have to just trust each other and use trust me bro accounting. Like, hey, this guy's special, so therefore this transaction must go through, which is really how fundamentally software architecture works today in most fintechs. But in our case, everything is based on cryptographic proofs off-chain, which is what makes this multi-sig server pool possible, right? So now you'd have to break into a supermajority of the servers in order to steal the funds, which would be extremely difficult. And then what we do is the way we're deploying this is most of the functionality is going inside of a chip. That's a custom chip that we're creating. And to break in, you'd have to, in say a pool of 15 servers, you'd have to break into the chip, which will not divulge its private key ever unless there's some huge bug that I missed, but it shouldn't, that should not happen. You will not be able to break into the server unless you get inside the chip, and then you have to do it into the supermajority of the servers. So basically what that means is you'd have to have a really level of sort of secret government, agency, super levels of sophistication that I've never seen. And I worked inside the Beltway as a hacker and a security expert. So I don't think that this is really a system that is going to be very breakable. And it certainly is the most state-of-the-art, most secure variant of being able to store cryptocurrency off-chain, which almost every business that operates with cryptocurrency by definition has to do. They have to do some off-chain manipulation. Otherwise, they're not adding any value. Right. So that's the answer to how we store everything. And then the third thing I want to talk about is the identity, right? Because that's a huge problem. Right now in crypto world, if you're a business, the biggest thing you're struggling with is who really are your users? And there's also a usability problem from both the business's end, like how do I store cryptocurrency? How do I custody things safely? And then make them liquid so things are useful, right? In our system, you have the security of nearly cold storage, but at the same time, you have instantaneous liquidity, right? So all the funds are in this multi-server, impenetrable almost. I mean, I can't say it'll never be hacked, but I can say that it's nearly never going to be hacked. And in that format, everything's actually still liquid. So now, as a business, if you're doing an OTC transaction, for example, a person can put up the fiat, get issued digital currency equivalents of it, have that in their Rune Wallet, which is actually going to be your bank's wallet. Say you're, Falcon Private Bank or whatever, you do a lot of OTC transactions. And you're going to be able to have that currency, sitting in the user's wallet who wants to pay fiat for actual cryptocurrency, right? Meanwhile, the Bitcoin owner can deposit their Bitcoin into the multi-sig pool, and now they have that in the wallet. And now the OTC trade is really, really simple. They just directly transacted right in the wallet, and it happens instantaneously. And they don't have to know each other or trust each other. You just have to trust the entity operating the pool. So if today everybody's trusting certain entities to do certain types of transactions, like most of the world trusts, Bank of America, I mean, it's in America anyway, there's a lot of US customers, right? Commercial banking, they trust commercial real estate industries, they trust commercial lenders, they trust exchanges of all types, starting with the New York Stock Exchange, right? Extremely trusted centralized agency. Right. I feel very safe putting assets on there. What we're doing is creating a way for that to happen digitally across all the tokens in the world and all the cryptocurrencies in the world. But there is a problem. The problem is, if I'm the NYSE and I want to KYC AML my users, of course I have to, right? But I don't want to change the blockchain or invent a new blockchain or break everything, right? I don't want to do that because I can't. I mean, their blockchain is a truly distributed system. I have to invent my own blockchain to go add these KYC AML features, and no one would use it because they'd be like, wow, my identity is all over this blockchain. So we came up with a really clever way of solving that. And this was, so by the way, I have to give credit to my partners, right? So Chris Odom is the inventor of open transactions, which is the system that the cryptographic proof off-chain functionality is based on. And that's been written since 2011. We're the commercial instantiation of it. And Chris Odom, in fact, is the CEO of the company. Our third partner is Justice Ranveer, who's the inventor of BIP47, right? So BIP47 is an identity protocol I'm about to talk about. And it solves a bunch of important problems. So the fundamental promise of it, and this works today, is that between two users, user A over here and user B, it works like PayPal. But to the rest of the world, and this does this on-chain and off-chain, to the rest of the world, no one sees what's happening. If I'm some third-party observer down here, I don't know what's happening between A and B. But between A and B, they have a full transaction log, and they can just call each other by name, and they are absolutely mathematically guaranteed that the way they send funds to this BIP47 identity over here, they are sending funds only to the private key that is associated with that identity, which means you have cryptographic mathematical proof of the fact that you sent the funds to the right person. Mm-hmm. Now imagine over here, I am bank, and these are my users over here. So what happens in our identity algorithm is instead of using receiving addresses, you just exchange these BIP47 credentials, which you also call the Rune identity. So I'm going to call it the Rune identity. You exchange the Rune identity credentials. And what happens is on chain, we're not actually doing away with receiving addresses. What we do is we exchange what's called a Diffie-Hellman shared secret between the two, which is kind of spooky action at a distance. It is based on combining the opposite party's public key with your own private key. And when you do the Diffie-Hellman transformation on it, what happens is, voila, on both ends, you have the same shared secret without transmitting it. Now we take that shared secret, which is now, I'm gonna say it's in right here in the middle, and that shared secret, you can index your receiving addresses off that deterministically. But what happens is this happens automatically inside the wallet, so the users don't have to worry about it. What the users do is say, I want to send 5 Bitcoin and 3 Ethereum and God knows what else and a few real estate tokens over here to, whoops, wrong hand, to the Bank of America. And they can just do that. And the Bank of America can refund that, right? There's a problem with receiving addresses in the space right now that you can't just send a refund without getting another receiving address. But all these exchanges of receiving addresses cause a huge problem for the fintech industry. We have one potential customer, which I cannot name, but one that we've met with quite a bit, spent a lot of time with. They're in the gaming industry. Mm-hmm. And they transact a whole lot of virtual goods via cryptocurrency worldwide. The problem is that their systems are being used for, guess what? Fraud, money laundering, all sorts of transactions they don't really want to support. Why? Because right now, when I give my receiving address to somebody, that may not be my receiving address. That may be somebody else's receiving address. Maybe the mafia in the Soviet Union. I don't know. You don't know. I may have been spoofed and accidentally funds are being stolen from me because somebody intercepted the communication between me and the exchange. And they received a receiving address from me that actually wasn't mine. And it actually went to some hacker and it's gone. Right? So Rune Identity actually fixes all those problems, but there's an even more powerful commercially, right? Because what we're trying to do here is we're not trying to like create a thing that is trying to break the world. We're creating a thing that lets the existing fintech system interoperate with the crypto industry and create entire new businesses in the process. You know, I don't know what all the possible uses are. You know, so far use cases are in social media, they're in gaming, they're in banking, they're in exchanges, they're in commodity trading, right? They're in tokenization of assets, they're in securities, STOs. So all those are use cases that we've dealt with and we support, but I don't know what new ones there will be. So some of these are existing, history, fintech exchange has existed in the history of fintech for over 100 years at least. So we're supporting an old technology, but the tokenization of say real assets that hasn't happened till recently. So we support that as well. But to do any of these things, you have to be able to KYC AML your users. It's not an optional thing. Right? But it's a voluntary thing. So what we're doing, our system does not require you to change the blockchain or make the blockchain permission-based or centralized or anything. In fact, our identity system and our servers don't require any changes to the blockchains at all, and they work with them today. So with all that said, you still have the ability to KYC AML, because when you create a set of Rune credentials, and I'm a bank, for example, and I create new credentials for me, for Mihao. What I can do is I can check, as the bank, I can check Mihao's ID, I can check his passport, I can do whatever KYC AML. And then I can digitally sign the credentials. And there's no limit to how many digital signatures authenticating any number of things. I mean, they could authenticate that I climbed Mount Everest. The Sherpas of Mount Everest could digitally sign my BIP47 identity and say, hey, I climbed Mount Everest. And when you do that, you have the ability to KYC AML everybody. So now as a business, you know who your users are. And you have mathematical proof that the funds that you're sending and receiving from said users can only come from those said users' private keys, which is certainly a whole lot better than anything that's happening today.
Yeah, it sounds very powerful. It sounds like a fantastic mechanism to mediate between the world of full-blown blockchain and the world of current fintech. But unfortunately, as much as I know there's so much more you can discuss and delve into, Michal, we'll have to wrap there for the moment. But just give a shout out if people want to get more information on Rune Wallet and the services provided. Where can they get it?
So I'm Michal at runewallet.com. So it's MEHOW at runewallet.com. And our website is runewallet.com. And myself, and here's Crypto Puppy. I have to say a shout out to Crypto Puppy. So Crypto Puppy and I thank you for the interview time, and I hope I explained our technology super well.
Absolutely.
He's chilling, so.
I'm glad to see he's enjoying, we're enjoying, and Michal, thanks so much for helping to break down this system. It'll be interesting to see how it is applied into the future in a way to secure funds in a way that, just as you said, doesn't exist in the modern current financial system. Michal, President of Rune Wallet, thanks so much for joining us, and stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest in news and information. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.